He said it's not a song, it's a way of life. It's a forever thing, it's a message. He said you can say that water is life. You can sing it again and again, but will they listen? Are we gonna stand by these words? Are we gonna find a way to change?
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Yapping with Yucca podcast. My name is Ennedith Lopez. I'm the Policy Campaign Manager at Yucca. And today we will be talking about acequias, traditional waterways, and farming. And so I will pass it on to our guests to introduce themselves, their affiliations, and what it is that they do here in New Mexico. If you would like to start us off.
Bueno, buenas tardes, les de Dios. My name is Jorge Garcia. I'm with I'm the director of the Center for Socio-Sustainable Systems. I'm also the secretary of the South Valley Regional Association of Acequias and parciante of the Ranchos de Armijo en Atrisco Acequia in Atrisco.
Excuse me. Muy buenos días. Buenas tardes. Check my clock. My name is Patrick Jaramillo, and I think first and foremost I'm parciante on the Acequia de los Garcias off the Rio Santa Cruz, and I'm also the co-director of the where do I work? The American Friends Service Committee. Yes, I'm the co-director of the American Friends Service Committee, the New Mexico program. Should probably do that. Do a little cleaner. I guess, yeah, we'll stick with that.
Hello, my name is Xazziel Martinez. I am a farmer off the Armijo Acequia here in the valley in Albuquerque. I don't have any titles. I'm just a community member, a community steward. I'm doing my best right now to start and revitalize as many farms as I can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We find it really important to have a conversation of acequias, farming, and traditional waterways, especially when it comes to Yucca's work, where we're seeing the impact of the climate crisis and seeing kind of like this resource battle, right? Around the conversation of water, around who has access to what water, what should we do with like limited water resources? And so we see acequias and these traditional waterway practices and community stewards as a key element to both protecting cultural heritage and ancestral knowledge, but also to challenging this economy that we live in that's pretty extractive in the sense where, you know, we have all these unlimited resources. It's buy, extract, take, and sell, right? But a lot of times there's this question as to, okay, what is it that has worked? What is it that our ancestors have practiced? And in what ways can we continue to carry that forward when it comes to this existential threat of the climate crisis? So to start off, I was wondering, Patrick, if you could give us a little more insight as to what it means to be a parciante and what that means in the acequia community.
So, a parciante is the interesting thing about this? You're right on about where acequias are placed now in history, in this moment, and so vocabulary means a lot, and we can get into that a little bit later when we even talk about the different terms. But yeah, parciante, I guess the best way. It's not participant, but you're a water right holder, and in New Mexico, a water right holder is not a water right owner, and you don't own water. That's a kind of a myth sometimes people think, but you have a right to divert, and so to be a parciante in a particular acequia means that in this particular case, with the Acequia de los Garcias, along the Santa Cruz River, we have certain days, we have our time allotment. And so being a parciante means when the Acequia Los Garcias gets water off the river, my farm and my family's farm, we can divert some of that water to farm to put on our. So that's the short answer.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask all of you, so what is the historical and cultural significance of acequias when it comes to farming, when it comes to building community relationships, when it comes to cultural heritage?
I think that to answer that, we have to look at first where acequias actually come from, not only geographically, but also in terms of what they meant for those geographies. So acequias were developed in North Africa as part of the irrigation methods that the Moors and developed, and
Western Asia.
Huh?
Sorry to interrupt, but since we're not, and Western Asia.
in Western Asia.
In Yemen and
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. All of those places that eventually they became a technology transfer from the North Africans over to the Iberians, and so the acequias came here via the Spanish people when they came, and mingle over with the agricultural practices of the pueblos, and in the case of Mexico, with the methods that the Mexican indigenous peoples used. And so their significance to me is that they enclose a lot of different understandings about the peoples who have incorporated that system, because essentially acequias are communal systems. So all the way from North Africa to Nuevo Mexico, they still have the same formation. They serve the purpose of bringing people together to share in an equitable, in a balanced way, share the water and share the resource, and that brings accountability for all the parciantes, all the people that are attached to any particular acequia.
Yeah.
That was the general point that I was going to get across too, is that it's a lattice work that allows us to come together as people and allows us to sustain ourselves. You know, it's what brought lifeblood to this valley for who knows how long, thousands of years potentially. But, you know, not just the acequias, but, you know, the river itself, you know, just this valley in general. But I think Jorge is right on the nail there with it allows us to have the connection to everyone else who's not only here now, but was there in the past, which is important.
Yeah, and so I would like to ask, like, in what ways, given that it's a communal system, how do folks share responsibility? How is there like a collective agreement as to, you know, taking care of the acequias, or even within like farming and that work? Like, in what ways are responsibilities shared or agreed to? Just because, like you said, it's a communal system. And I know that like a lot of the water in New Mexico is downstream, right? It comes from the very top of the Rockies, or I don't know, someone might be able to correct me on
San
that.
Juan Chama.
Chama, and it comes all the way down to Rio Grande. And so when it comes to these communal systems, in what ways is shared responsibility and obligations both allocated, and how is it practice within community?
I mean, I could tell you my experience so far. I've only been doing this seriously for the last few months, I would consider. I have been working farms in the valley for the last 8 years or so, but now I've taken it as a personal mission to start my own things. And I just came from my farm actually today, where I had my first water in the Jaramillo acequia over off of Young Avenue down there. And my experience is there's no one else there willing to take up the torch of that responsibility. I've been trying to meet all my neighbors in the area, and either they're too old, they might not have the physical ability, or they just don't care. They don't think it's important. And, you know, I've been talking to my ditch rider very closely recently, and he's excited to just let me do what I have to do if I'm there to farm. He's not going to get in my way at all. You know, he was explaining how to make these diversions work. And I seem to be the only one in that particular area who's interested in not only learning, but passing it on to everyone around me. So how I share the responsibility is me and my buddies go out there with rakes and clean that thing every chance we get. Every time I see a piece of trash or a piece of glass, I'm picking it up. And that's what I know I will do. And I'm just hoping to spread that message because I'm just one man.
I'll jump in. That's a big question that has that's not an easy answer. The general way, I would say, the caveat is acknowledging Jorge's point that acequias came from, we're here in the Americas and they've traveled from across several continents to get here. So, but I can only speak of my experience of the acequias of New Mexico, and that is that every parciante. So let's clarify. Kind of go to the question about how important the acequias are in the communities, and my answer to that is they are foundational. Mm-hmm. They are the pillars. They make up. It's really, in New Mexico traditional communities anyway. The argument, I'm not going to make this as fact, but you could say that the pillars were the land grant, the merced, the acequia, and the church. And that's just governance. That's how you manage the resources, manage the community. And so the acequia to me is shorthand, or not shorthand, but there's an equivalent to community. But it also is the physical conveyance. It's the canals that carry the water, but it's the community that make up the community of irrigators. And it's also the government, because these are, in New Mexico, they're political subdivisions of the state government. So these are really important institutions in the community, and the way that responsibility is delegated is all the parciantes are responsible for cleaning and maintaining, and they usually do that once a year. Some acequias do twice, but mostly it's once a year in the spring. The limpia or the saca, to sacar el acequia or limpiar, and that's done by every parciante. And there's an interesting thing with like large owners. You still have, there's the word that we use is peon, in English a peon is what do you call it?
Derogative.
It's very derogative. But with the acequias, everybody's responsible. If you have a big piece of land, you're responsible for sending peones. In the old days, it was usually your kids. Mm. But these days, and as my friend here alluded to, the contemporary conditions in acequia communities are such that there are not many people left to carry those on, to carry those traditions, and not just the traditions. I mean, just the actual work of maintaining the acequia and do the work of the planting. But and then on top of that, there's the governance. There's usually Xazziel mentioned the ditch rider, which is an interesting thing that came out of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, which I'll let Jorge talk about that later, but that's an interesting development in the 20th century. And now they call them ISOs, right? Irrigation Systems Operator. The old word in the acequia community is mayordomo. And the mayordomo, if you come in the English word, it comes from Latin, the major domo, right? And the head of the household. Earlier when I said that nobody owns water, in our traditional community, water is a gift from God. So God, and there's as Jorge pointed out, the acequias came out of the Middle East, and that's founded on the law of thirst, which means nobody can deny a living thing water. Everything has a right to life, and the acequia serves that. And that is in direct contradiction to the world we live in right now, But the mayordomo, the head is the head of the household, right? He's not the owner, but the steward, right? The sovereign is the owner, and where it comes from the feudalism, that's the king. But in this case, the sovereign is the creator, so the creator owns the water, but the mayordomo is the steward, and the mayordomo is usually elected. And then now, in the modern times, with our laws, we have a commission of elected officials, and that's a. I don't know about quick, but that's a a breakdown of the acequia responsibilities. Very bare bones, though.
Can I?
Yeah.
I'd like to add a little bit to that, simply because I think that we're talking acequias in the modern times, no? And in the modern times, especially here in the Middle Rio Grande region, well, we now have a conservancy district. And so to think about acequias and to understand acequias, we really have to think about the time before our time, the time before 1848, Because acequias are systems that were community-led, community-created, community-maintained, meaning that there was no government subsidies, there was no government offices to come and do the job for the people. So acequias was also that allow people to sustain themselves, and through community collaboration, people maintain a system that was not maintained by anybody else. No, so I think that's what we have to think about another time, because the problem that Xazziel is having is that people are disconnected from these communal ways, whether they're all young or whatever it might be. We're disconnected from that. Community was broken in the Middle Rio Grande in the 1930s when the MRGDC, when the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy came. They broke that. People at that point began to get out of the region to work. And so what we have is a dysfunctional community that was disattached from its community responsibilities. That's what we have to understand, not in the context of today, but we have to go back previous to 1935 and begin to figure out how do we connect ourselves back as a community, not just as an individual, but as a community.
That's part of my overarching mission, is to reawaken that in people. I think if you have a strong back and you like being outside, you should be digging the acequia. And that is a good enough, simple enough life purpose, because you are saving the day in the long run. Every little bit of work we do is not only for the people around us, but for the generations to come. And I think a lot of people are drawn to that. When I show it to people, I see fire start in their eyes. But if they're never taught that at all, they don't know where to start. So that's what I am excited to foster coming up.
Yeah, so thank you. I've learned simply a lot just simply having this conversation with all of you, and recognizing that in many ways the institutions that we're kind of beholden to at this moment, right? Because that can change. We're beholden to really have cracked down on traditional waterways, right? And so one thing that's coming to mind is both through the practice and the education. In what ways are acequia communities bringing up youth or trying to foster youth leadership so these traditions continue? I know you've mentioned that you've done the farming, that you have been working with in collaboration and bringing in your buddies. Like, what has that been? How has that experience been for you? And pulling in, like, let's say your friends or your neighbors, and in what ways are you all helping foster youth leadership so these practices and traditions can continue?
I'm the oldest, so let me give it the first shot, no? Community youth development, to me, is a byproduct of what we need to do. Because in my view, we have institutions that have hindered or prevented those community relations that exist around the notion of acequias and the legal responsibilities that acequias bring into the community. So to me, youth development is a byproduct, because we have to reestablish the institutions that we have at our command. And acequias are institutions that are still valid today as they were 150 years ago, 200 years ago, because the acequia laws still maintain the communal responsibility that everybody who lives in a benefited area and owns a home and has a water right, if that area is recognized as an acequia and is organized as an acequia, then that person is actually subjected to the communal laws that pertain to that particular acequia today. And so that's what I'm saying. I think for me is to go back and really aim for the highest point, which is to bring back our governance systems, because out of that, teaching will come naturally once we really understand the system that we need to put back together. That's what I think.
If we're going down or going down according to age, I'll go. And mine will be short because it's mostly in my work we don't do don't do directly like youth work. So we try to maintain partnerships with other orgs or other people who do that, and we support that work. But mostly to echo what Jorge is saying, in that the acknowledgement that what you said, there's a lot of the dominant forces, the political and economic forces at play right now, are in direct contradiction to the acequia values, and I mean really the values of life, and the fact that, I don't want to say, but in the same way that they've attacked these forces have had impacts on acequia communities, it's just kind of what's the expression of, like, not scaling, but like, family is community is and so, like, these things are breaking up communities. These things are breaking up families. And so the fact that we need to go out and do youth work, like the fact that we need to repair generational harms is just a testament to, like, the trauma. I was talking to somebody the other day about that, the colonization process of New Mexico, and the dual colonization, really. But they're like, I don't believe it exists. There's no trauma. And so I asked him something in Spanish, and he was like, I don't speak Spanish. I was like, I know. It knocked the language out of your mouth, bro. You can't even speak the language of your. And I had to learn as an adult or as later in life, because, anyway, that's. I don't even know if that was an answer to your question. The questions were in bad shape, but there's a lot of people. It's that life, where life in the same way. What keeps us going is that the way I describe these things, right? After the colonization process, it was mostly a militarized economy. Now it's an extractive economy. And the thing about acequias is acequias always supported an economy of life, because it was not about making money and it wasn't about status. It's about sustaining a community. And so people, it's like we, in our farm training program, seeds want to grow, plants want to grow. You just need to create the conditions where they can thrive. And so we're trying to do, like, people, we want to be connected. We want to be, people want to do this. So we just need to work to create the conditions that we can come together in a healthy way. Anyway.
Yeah, nice. That leads right into what I was thinking. Well, I wanted to mention that I attended a workshop recently with a bunch of teachers at an elementary school, and the community was invited. Only some people came. There was a nice family there. I forget the names. There was a family from the area there, and then there was me and my girlfriend, and we were the only, as far as I could tell, the only community members that weren't educators that showed up to this. And it was fascinating to me, because it was a great opportunity for me to show that I have the same mission, or at least a similar mission to them, and that is, to reach the youth. Now, I know how I could reach the youth. I know how I can inspire people. I do it as often as I can with my friends. A lot of them in their early 20s. I'm the old guy in those circles. I'm only 29, but I'm the old guy in the room. And they're all like 20 to 25, And I'm doing my best to just get them in on this, because I know they're excited about it. But beyond that, the macro vision of it all is that, not only do we need to teach this generation, they need to teach the next generation. Much like you were talking about trauma, the trauma of this system is going to take just as long or longer to fix, much like when you're fixing your own internal trauma. We have to face the problems head on and do the legwork now. And I think being in rooms like I was with those teachers was a great start, because I was able to just speak from the heart, and they were able to write a lesson plan. And that's not my wheelhouse at all. But I know I could do it, but in my brain, it's like I have to choose something. I know what I'm passionate about and where I can make the most change, and that's what I want to focus on. I'd rather delegate the specialties to the specialists in that field. So I think it's important. What I told that group that day is, this is all well and good. I'm very happy to meet you all, but we need to continue this discussion in a way that we can present it to people that don't agree with us at all, because that's who we need to reach. We don't need to reach people who are already convinced about this. we need to support those people for sure. They're fighting a losing battle, especially the teachers. But that already has been leading into some other areas that, again, I'm not comfortable so much in. It's just out of my experience. But I think it's very important to put myself in an uncomfortable situation for the good, the greater good. Like, because that would be awesome if all of a sudden next year I have these lesson plans lined up from K through 12 at several schools and that just started with me having an idea, you know? I just met with one of those teachers from that day, Alex. Remember Alex from the high school? He came to my farm, and he was inspired right away because he was like, I have high school age students who want to get out here and dig and they want to harvest. And I was like, I would love to get them out here. I'd love to teach them that lesson of like, you will get the literal fruits of your labor. Just get out here and start, you know? But I think, I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but it's in that direction of we need to start there institutionally teaching the next generations.
Oh, but that's precisely what I was saying, right? It's a byproduct, right? So creating the conditions for that to happen is a byproduct of taking that initiative. Alex is a good example, right? We're doing a program in ACE. I met him in ACE. He goes, hey, good to meet you, blah, blah, blah. I go, yeah, there's an opportunity for training. You should come. He came, and then he met you. And so by doing that, teaching the youth becomes a byproduct because then we start opening different instances where people who are ready to do that will have the space to actually take the kids. And so that's the reason why my argument is that we have to focus on reconstitute what provides that environment to be able to teach others. And that is acequias, right? But we have to think, for me, we have to think beyond the romanticism of acequias, right? We have to understand that those are institutions. Those are our institutions, right? And so we have to institute them to create the conditions for those plants to grow, right? And in this case, for our seeds to grow, our kids to grow, to have those references and to start creating a network of people who are basically a resource.
Yeah. Part of that whole thing with teaching those kids is that it fosters critical thinking, which isn't taught anymore in schools, in my opinion. When I came through public school, I went to a charter school in high school, it was still public school. And all my learning was done from those around me willing to teach. It wasn't my teachers. They tried, but they're fighting a losing battle where we have to answer standardized tests correctly and stuff. It's not all about critical thinking. The only reason I had success like I did is that from the time I was born, it was pushed on me that I need to be a critical thinker in the bigger picture. And I think we have a unique opportunity in our area that we can use acequias as a direct physical and spiritual example of how that works in your personal life. The critical thinking, I mean, the lattice work itself, it mimics nature, which is inside of us. You know, the lattice work itself looks like our brain making connections, and that's our community making connections. And I think that's an important and exciting thing to be able to push that's both romantic and practical.
Yeah. I'll mention this without, in terms of that acequia education and the need to bring that thinking back. I know, I'll let you, I know CESOSS is doing work on curriculums, and I'll mention this, but I know the New Mexico Acequia Association has created some curriculum and are in partnership with folks to bring that into public school curricula. And it comes back many years ago. So there's a dicho in New Mexico. They used to say, pa la escuela o pa la acequia. And it was either go to school or be condemned to a life of hard labor, right? But a few years ago, the people in the community in the New Mexico Acequia Association really turned that on the head and said, la acequia es nuestra escuela. And it's that there's so much to learn from the land and from the management. And it's math and science and critical thinking, and there's a push now. I can't speak too much to it because I'm not directly involved, and I don't want to, talk about the work that's not mine. But I know this is going on in the community, a push to bring that component back into the education, at least in public schools. We'll see how that works. But
Yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate what all of you are raising, right? The need to think of building different conditions, even simply outside of these systems, within people's systems, but also challenging as to how the current curriculum and what it is that young people are being taught isn't necessarily fostering or like creating conditions for them to think critically, to think as to the significance of what may surround them, or just even simply like the impact on their neighbors, right? And at Yucca, I'm very much a technical policy person, right? But I have found a lot of inspiration, especially from folks who are a part of the SECA communities, from the farming communities, because you are all the ones doing the hard labor that sustains the basic foundations of life. Like, these policy folks can give themselves and gloat themselves for as much as they want. And yes, it's one thing to be able to write a bill, but it's another thing to be able to create and sustain life for itself, right? And when I'm talking about that, I'm thinking about food and food resources. And one thing that I'm wondering is, given the imminent threat of the climate crisis, at Yucca, we see this as an opportunity for a few things, right? It's an opportunity to create alternative systems and to create alternative practices, even if it's not at a systemic institutional level. If it starts at a community level, it's planting those seeds, right? Starting small. And then also an opportunity for practicing what it is that we want and need to see, right? And so one question that I'm kind of pondering with is, in the recent years or in the past few years, what have you seen change in terms of practices and, like, let's say water resources, farming practices, and in what ways has the climate crisis impacted, let's say, acequia communities or even these small communal institutions in themselves? In what ways have they needed to become resilient, or even like what's the negative impact that you might be seeing?
Let me go back to early 2000s. Early 2000s is when we started to put the acequias back together in the valley as sub-political divisions of the state, meaning turning back the bylaws to the state and making sure that all the legalities were in place for the acequias to be recognized as sub-political divisions of the state. And so for me, when we talk about, and so back in the early 2000s in the Atrisco area, well, that was only the farming that was being done by people who grow alfalfa and small parciantes who still kept it, but there was no farming the way there is farming today. Let me start there, no? And so and so when we think about systemic change, for me, bringing back acequias is a systemic change, because we're not talking about aspirations. We're talking about having a voice that carries on with constitutional rights that are afforded to all of those who live on benefited areas and have pre-1907 water rights. That's a systemic change. If we're able, my contention is the following: if we're able to reconstitute ourselves in a significant way, meaning that a majority of people understands their rights and are attached to acequias, then we can have systemic change. Why? Because we have provisions that belong to those acequias as government agencies, and we can actually, negotiate, make arguments, fight practices, policies that might be, contrary to acequias. And so I want to start there. I want to think, I don't want us to think that, there can be some systemic change. No, we have in our communities tools to make systemic change. That's my contention, because, and let me just end with this, unless Mexico and the United States go into a fight or they break the treaty rights, those rights are actually upheld, meaning that they are constitutional rights. All we have to know is what are those rights and how do they actually work out, and that's bringing, to me, that's I want to start there. The seeds for systemic change in our communities for what we want is there. There needs to be a lot of more other systemic changes that need to take place. But in all reality, a lot of those are outside of our power. We're fighting them. We're fighting those powers. But it's going to take a lot to change them. We can change ourselves and change our communities, and then we can propel systemic change for our regions. Right? That's what I think.
I think that's where the big change really comes in. People get lost in the idea that this mountain we have to tackle is overwhelming, because it is. But the way you make the big change is change what is in your area, change your world. Maybe if you're unhealthy, fix your health. Once you're in good spirits and good health, you can help everyone around you. That's the small community model right there. And if more and more people are able to take it upon themselves to affect just whoever's around them, all of a sudden we have a movement of people doing that. And the big change happens passively, like you're saying, as a byproduct, like you were saying earlier. It's the same idea with this. Yeah.
On that, yeah, the change is not the change. What do they say? Existence is resistance. So, as long as we exist, and you said it's a practice, and that's, I think, what is so important about not just the acequia philosophy, but that way of looking at it is a practice, right? It is a relationship. It is our human behavior with the natural world that produces this result. And so you were correct in that the threats that we're facing are the legal and economic challenges, and that's we say in New Mexico, water rolls uphill to money, and that's the truth, is because what Jorge is saying and what we're saying, acequeros, people in our community, we actually have these rights, but in practice they are just disrespected every turn. Municipalities, developers, oil, just whatever, they just and they come up with ways that just however the myriad ways to not disrespect, but misuse and take and so that's what I'm saying in terms of like existence is resistance. As the world changes, and this is we've talked a lot about this is narrative, but truth is it's not just that it's just words. I mean, this is the truth that we're carrying, and so some people will want to deny climate change. They want to do this. They want to do this. But at the end of the day, it's the practice of that these institutions and the practices that the community takes to keep these are sustainable practices. The other there was that old saying, what was it? God during the colonial period, God is in heaven, the king is in Spain, the Pope is in Rome, and we're here. It's just us. Like you were saying, there's no subsidies. There's no something happens, we need to do it. And so there is a long history of that that running through people, and so it really is. I think I'm kind of getting off court, but it's that the change is to stay alive. The fact that these institutions have been around for millennia, right? As we know them here for 400 years in this part of the world, but they've been around for thousands of years in other parts of the world as a testament to their sustainability and their resilience. So I think as the world changes and if this place can sustain life in the future, and that's a big question. I hate to be that person, but that's real. If this place can't sustain life, I think it'll be the acequia systems and the acequia communities that'll be the ones that'll be here.
Yeah, it's very important to. I don't, with the trajectory that I'm currently on, I understand that it's very important for me to not only dabble but delve deeply into the rights that we have, how I retain them, and how I can hold my own in a room with people that are looking for every turn to get me on a technicality. And that sort of thing scares me. I don't like bureaucracy. It freaks me out. But I understand at this point and in my position, I have to do that work. I have to do that homework in order to make sure that we can retain what we have and I don't lose anything else. And what I mean by that is, I worked a farm off 40th Street, Central and 40th, for almost 10 years. And I put blood, sweat, and tears into that place. I put all my love in that place. We grew a lot of food there. And recently, I heard it got sold to BlackRock. And I had no idea how I would have even kept that. Is there a way? I didn't have family lineage, but I worked the land. I was the steward there. And I think if I would have known this way or that, or what rights I had, I could have gotten that paperwork or whatever had to happen in place that I could have retained that for my kids, for my grandkids, for everyone. So it makes me sad, but I always feel that rumination leads to stagnation. So I'm not going to be sad enough to when I stay here, but I'm going to let it teach me a lesson that I'll never forget, that I need to become educated on those things. And all of us do, so we can retain this. Because what is it, 2%? Mm-hmm. We have 2% left of what we started with, something like that. And not only is that a shame, but, like I said, I'm not going to dwell on it enough to get angry, but I'm going to dwell on it enough to take action.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that there's something that you said that goes back to something else. You're talking about these competing systems and the values, and I think that's one thing that we need to acknowledge and say it, because we've been too polite about it. But you mentioned talking to people who want to dismiss your rights on a technicality, on a bureaucratic technicality.
They want to use these 3-4 syllable words. Not that I don't read. It's just that's not for everyone. So some people are going to tune out when you do that.
Yeah. But I guess the point I'm making, and I brought this up in a meeting a while back. We were talking about, and it's something that land-based people in the acequias, and I know it got popular after Standing Rock, but the truth, the added that water is life. I mean, that is true, right? That is absolutely true. The thing I was just talking about, the thing about the truth is it's true in positive and negative forms. And so to say water is life, that is the truth. And so to deny water is to deny life. And we're just okay with these people saying, well, I have this piece of paper, so you can just move on and let it's not the violent, death. Like I've told some of my colleagues, the guns are not pointing at us anymore, but the people have the papers that will send the guns soon enough. Right. And that's the thing, to just completely dismiss the life of people who, living, breathing human beings, children of God, if you will. And to say, you know what? Well, my natural gas well needs water. My chip factory, my golf course needs water. And you can just go die. And they hey, look, I'm not gonna be the one that shoots you, but we're gonna turn you out into the desert and
good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. And so that's just what we're up against, and we're too polite to say that the quest for money is killing us. Like that if we value development, we value these things over human life. That's just the death sentence to our community, and we just don't want to talk about it. Anyway.
Well, it brings up a point I wanted to make earlier, is that nature will always take over again anyway. Anytime we try to fight it, we lose. Yeah. And the option is to destroy the earth. Really, it'll kill all of us, but the earth will keep going. No matter if it looks arid or whatever, if all humans are gone, it's going to keep going. Anytime we try to fight that nature, we lose. Anytime you leave a shed there in the sun, it's going to fall apart. So with that in mind, that goes to the same idea of working with the land. That's the sustainability there, that you have to work with it. You can't fight it.
Well, actually, I was asked a question in a forum some time ago where they say, they asked the question, how should we fight nature? Well, that's the wrong approach right from the beginning. We don't fight nature because we are nature. We have to learn to move along with nature and transition from this idea that somehow we're external to nature. We are nature. We are a byproduct of nature. And so we have to keep it like that, I think.
Well, like even in another example, that's the way I grow my crops, is I don't ever use any sort of pesticide, 100%. And the way I get that done is I grow food for the bugs to eat so they don't eat my crops. You know, like it's all a system. It's about maintaining the ecosystem.
Have you heard that dicho about planting? They used to, my grandpa, well, it's an old one. When you plant, you have 3 seeds when you're planting, and you plant para nos, para vos, y los animalitos de Dios, right? So you got to plant for yourself, for your community, and for all God's creatures. And then my grandpa, my joke is that we plant 4, because 1 for the ladrón. That dude's never late.
I appreciate everything that you are all bringing up. Thank you for challenging my mindset when it comes to institutional change. As of lately, I'm feeling a little beat up from the legislative session, but hearing that, we must not go against the terrain of nature, but be in harmony with nature is really what's going to sustain our lives, especially with this imminent threat that we're facing. Is just something that I think people need to be reminded of day in and day out, right? I think that people are there's just a lot going on in the world, and there's just a lot of challenges and a lot of harm that people are experiencing. But even simply being able to be honest and blunt as to what's the cause of all this harm and all this suffering that we're fearing, or even just this worry we're feeling for the future. What is it? And really, it's this greed, this type of thinking that's very self-absorbed, me. And so I appreciate all of you really bringing up the important aspect of it being a communal system that's really going to sustain life, and the world and nature, it's going to run its course the way it has to in order to continue, right? And it will continue whether, we have resources to stay alive or unfortunately we go extinct. I hope not. But those are really important points. And so I appreciate you challenging my thinking, and I appreciate all of you and what you've shared. So just to wrap up, is there anything that you would like to bring up, or you would want listeners to carry forward with them as, they continue through their life journey?
Yeah, I'd like to add, we're in a very interesting times, and we feel the pressure of the decisions that extractivist people who have no morals, people who have no sense of understanding. Really, we're talking about, to me, we're talking about the lowest of the law. Let's put it that way. All of the decision makers and all the things that we're fighting is because they're coming from the lowest of the law in our society, right? And so, and that means that we're dominated by greed, by arrogance, all the things that they can take. But something that I've been reflected on, and I owe this thinking to late Bonfil Batalla, who wrote the México Profundo, because he brings a very important point that we should not forget. We're brown people. Yeah, we're brown people in the United States, and we're brown people who have been disconnected from tradition, culture, and everything that you can put on the table. Yes, those are who we are today, right? But nevertheless, as brown people, and as limited as we might be, we have a lineage. And it doesn't matter if the lineage goes back to Europe, it goes back to Mexico, it goes back anywhere. It doesn't matter. We have lineage. And so what gets me though is that when this very low energy and high level greed people make all of these arguments and put us all to work to be able to defend ourselves against, their what their lower instincts are demanding, if we're not careful, we'll end up living in their world. And I think that for me, understanding that we have lineage, one of the questions they keep asking is, why do we need to teach our youth, right? Why do we have to do it? And there are practical reasons for that, like water, like a little, like that. But we have to go back to trauma, shame, because as brown people, we're always, we are kept very busy dealing with their world, the world that they live in, the world that they're creating for themselves, not the world that we're creating for ourselves. We're not creating a world for ourselves. We're fighting their decisions. And by doing that, we get distracted, still dwelling on their system. And so I appreciate Bonfil Batalla because he said in a great book that he wrote, Mexico Profundo, he says, well, there are two projects going on as we speak. The Mesoamerican civilization, which includes all the native people from across the continent, in reference to the civilizations that were here before the Western civilization, and Western civilization. And Western civilization is in crisis. It is dying. It is, but when you go into indigenous communities, what do we see? Dances. No, you go to Mexico, food everywhere, people working, people happy, people, reinventing themselves, people sustaining themselves. Life is blooming and everything is good. Those are the things that we need to fight for, in my view. The rest, yes, we live on this time. And some of us have to put in the time to understand and to create policy. That's what we have to do. But we shouldn't be doing that, or we shouldn't be getting wrapped up into their system. Those policies needs to go back to really change our way of life. And in order to be able to answer that in a concrete way, we have to ask the question, well, what is my way of life? Who am I in this current time, within this country? Who am I? What am I fighting for? And I think that we have to really ask ourselves really hard, because if we're not conscious about what that really means, then we'll go and fight them, and we waste energy. Yeah. Why? Because they have the monopoly. So of course we're gonna be losing all the time. And I said, if we take a step back, if we recreate our societies, if we take advantage of the fact that we do have, rights that are attached to those lands, then we can create a new world. Because in all reality, the extractivist society is broken because it's a system that is going nowhere. Evidence has shown that it doesn't matter how much we extract, we're never going to get anywhere. And I think that the solutions to climate change are a good example of that. No electrical car, no turbines, none of those things are going to save us from the predicament that we're in. It's only going to be going back to the original teachings that Creator gave us, and to live a simple life. Go back to very simple questions like my late and loved mentor Pablo Lopez used to say, how much is enough for us to live a good life? In that case, well, for some people might be a lot, for some people, but we asked ourselves and we live simple like that. And that's what I would like to stress, no? That as complicated as it is, let's remember that they're fighting their own battle to maintain the way of life that they superimposed on them. So let them succumb on their intent. And every policy that we should fight should be for our way of life. Because our way of life, I always make the case, because I don't want to confuse anybody, no? I belong to the Five-Finger Clan. So anybody who has 5 fingers, I don't care if they're white, black, yellow, I don't care. They're human beings. And we need to go back to basic principle things about universal laws and how we all relate. And really understand that whether we like it or not, we're colonized people. We were trained educated in a colonized manner. And for us to recognize that and begin the process to download our colonized mind by getting rid of hate, prejudice, the things that we don't like, the things that we like, and really get rid of those ways that were superimposed on us as modern human beings, I think we'll do ourselves a great favor, no? That way we don't have to be feeling so bad because everything that is going on. They're fighting their battle, which is to maintain their comfort. And their comfort is going down the drain. And we are people who have lived for generations with no comfort, so we have no problem. We should just fight to bring back our way of life. I said that as a straight out Mexicano, no? because we got to break that shame that we want to be anybody else. No, we are who we are. Anyway.
You said a lot I want to respond to.
That's a good closing statement, bro. I think that gets it across.
Yeah, I did want to say to what you were saying about perspective, and that's you were there's a few quotes we're talking about understanding the movements of the universe, right? Like where this is something bigger, and just being a New Mexican to understand that we had 3 flags fly over this land, and probably more in the future. Like, let's just be real. Just time. And I again, so I work for a religious organization, and oftentimes we talk about the work we do. Is earlier I talked about the body, humanity as a body, the body of Christ, stuff like that. And the work that we do is we have 2 hands, so we protect and we build, or we defend and we grow. And it's just what do we do, right? And I think with the time that we have and our abilities, we grow. And whether you grow food literally, or you're building structures, you're building community, you're doing these things, and when you need to, protect, defend. But you said a lot. I'm not gonna. I want to respond to a lot, but I'm good. I'm good.
Well, towards what you said, what I've been telling people simply is that I want to be the warrior in the garden and the gardener in the war. So I want to remind everyone when they're going crazy that maybe it didn't have to be that way. If we live more simply, maybe we can all live together. But if and when you have to protect, there's no reason to hold back.
Well, I want to add one more thing, just because I think that it's important to understand time. I think it's important to understand who we are, where we come from, who we come from, and how we came about, And I said Mexican because we Mexicans, in all reality, the way we're treated, we're like third-class citizens, Nobody, I think, besides maybe the black and the Mexicans, we're always sharing that, the way we speak and the way we think. But I want to say something that I think is very profound, because if we start this conversation thinking of ourselves as beings from, 1521 or 1848, or a result of a violation, a genocide, and all those things that caused us trauma, then we get stuck into that. But I would like to put a special tone to the beautiful brown people out there, the Indo-Hispano. And I want to say that to respect and understand that we're part of the experience of New Mexico beyond the Anglo-Saxon intrusion into this land, have been done in the time when the Indo-Hispano, maybe not the greatest friends of the world, but there was a level of cooperation. So I want to keep it that way. But I want to say something specific about us, So in this continent, right, for example, we Indo-Hispano people, we're always treated like we don't belong here. Always. Doesn't matter. Go to Mexico, come back, and you're going to put you to the side, and there will be a white family passing in front of you, and you'll be put to the side even if you don't even speak any English, right? That's the treatment we get. So we're always reminded, you're not from here. Or if you're from here, you just came not long ago. But that's not true. That's not true. I want us to remember, and so that's one aspect of us. The other aspect is that we're savages. We're always treated as savages. And that's the trauma that we carry, right? We don't want to do our traditional ways because those are things of the devil, or because those are not modern things. They don't help us to move forward. But I want to make the point that about 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, our people were bioengineering corn. And I think it's important to understand, because the Mexican have offered so many things to the world. And so about 4,000 years ago, corn came to the Southwest. And corn today is a major representative of the spiritual ways of all the peoples in this continent, of all of them, meaning that our people gave that to the world. And that's how we can trace our back to say, look, I'm not making the argument that I'm from here just because I want to say it and make myself feel good. It's because there are scientific traces of the exchanges that took place with one of the most sacred things that we can have, which is corn, coming from Mexico, right? And that reaffirms both the Pueblo and the Mexican connections and the contributions that we have done and continue to do to this land. And that is the legacy that we have to go back for. We're not here from, our trauma or our life didn't begin in 1848, didn't begin in 1521, it began a long time ago. And that's tracing our Indio ways from this continent, let alone going back to the Moors, letting go to the Spaniards. We're such a blessed people. I don't care what anybody says. I know that in this country we're like, well, are you full-blooded? Forget that. I'm a full-blooded. I got blood from across the world. And so all the people, all the little chiquitos that I see, all my brothers and sisters, they're all people who come from across the world. And people, if that is not a strong thing to know and to feel proud, I don't know what is. But that's what we have. That's our shame and our trauma has to end, because our trajectory in this land and across the world is vast. That's what I think, and that's what I profess.
Thank you all. I really appreciate all the insight and the wisdom that you have shared with us. And there you have it, people. We are people of the world. Our history, our lineage, our practices, and even simply our communal systems and practices is what really is going to carry us forward when it comes to the impact of the climate crisis, but also to continue our traditions and knowledge. And so, as people of the world, I really want to extend my appreciation to all of you and to our guests today for sharing their deep insights and wisdom with us. So there you have it, folks. This is Yapping with Yucca. Thank you again for listening. Take care.